welcome to Grafikmetal. I'm Veer Von Wright. Paradise freaking Lost is back. Latest album, Ascension, out today, September 19th. Man, this band, 37 years and counting, they've been at this. And they have aged like fine wine. I don't know what it is. I guess the Brits, what is it with the Brits and bands aging, better than others? I mean, this wine is tasting mighty good. I mean, their Ascension sounding really good. We'll see where it stacks up. But yeah, we're gonna take a look at the entire career, the mountain that is Paradise Lost, and we're going to tier rank all 17. It's now 17 albums for the band. So let's get to it. Let's bring up the whiteboard. They started in 1988. It's been a long journey, but this journey has actually taken or behold a very fascinating, interesting ethos that feels ironically very fitting for the band themselves. They began in the beginning as a death/doom metal band for the first few albums from 88 to 92-ish. Then they transitioned to a goth metal band from about 93, 98 for a few albums. Then they transitioned to alternative gothic rock from 99 to 04 for a couple albums. And then they transitioned back to gothic metal, and then once again now back to where it all began in death doom. So it's really interesting. They've come full circle, literally, which is very rare. You don't really see that too often in that perfect of a symmetry. It's common for bands to bounce back and forth or just completely always changing or somewhere in between, but rarely do you have such a very fluid, snake eating itself kind of full life cycle journey. It's very interesting. So kudos to them, because it really does feel very fitting, ironically, for the ethos of the band. Again, not sure how intentional it was, but it's really quick and cool to think about. So, but enough of the history of the band. Go to other episodes. We'll probably do one for Paradise Lost, our doc series where we have fun with it soon. But for now, what we're doing here is that we are going to rank all 17 albums up to this point. Again, that's including now Ascension, that was just out earlier today. I've already listened to it a couple of times, so that will be factored in. But this is the entire 17 studio full-length albums, ranked in a mountain or tier system that Grafikmetal likes to do. So we're gonna actually start with off the mountain or pyramid, in which case we have the albums in Requiem in 1997, we got Paradise Lost in 2005, and Believe in Nothing in 2001. All of them are, for the standards of the band, they're terrible. Let's be honest. They're just not very good. They are very weak. The production wasn't, that well thought through as far as the song structures. They felt very boring and bland and uninspired. It is conveniently a lot of times in the middle, of the band's era. So it does, maybe they were just, exhausted. We hear this all the time, in hindsight, how, we take for granted how extremely complicating and exhausting it is to be a musician and one that tours as much as they do. I mean, they've always been on a very rigid system, partly, the British, right? British have a tendency those bands have a tendency to be really, really, hard working, type of bands that really put a lot of effort and care into, the relationship with the fans and so forth. And, Paradise Lost is no different. So with that said, these are just, they're really uninspiring. That's the biggest thing. There's very little that came out of any of these albums that really was memorable. Outside of usually they have like a song that's usually the takeaway, but in this case just nothing really to talk about. So moving forward to the next tier, which is at the bottom, which we're calling Hang It On for Dear Life. And with these albums we got 1 Second in 1997, you got Tragic Idol in 2012, and Gothic in 1991. And about the only thing here to talk about, outside again a couple of tracks from here to there, is ultimately Gothic at least was the inspiration kind of route to ultimately getting the genre Gothic metal. Obviously Gothic had been around since the late 60s, early 70s with, all sorts of bands, and eventually to, I'm drawing a blank on the band I particularly wanted to bring up. Also a British band. And they also just recently came back and did a hell of a good job doing their album recently. Cure. Cure. Okay, Cure. It was bugging me. I had to think about it. I had to figure this out. But yeah, the point is that there were tons of bands that inspired and developed the Gothic scene. But as far as Gothic metal, again, yes, there are other options, Typo Negative and so forth, but they're ultimately, most people, specifically with this album Gothic, is kind of like the linchpin as far as when we start to identify Gothic metal. So got that going for her, which is really the reason where these albums are hanging on for dear life, hanging on a thread, because really that's the saving grace for this grouping. But again, very little greatness came out of these albums. I mean, I think that some people are going to actually have a soft spot for 1 Second. There are some good songs on that album. Gothic, obviously, as well. Personally, the real reason why I have Gothic so low is because, to me, the production sound quality is so bad on this specific album that it makes it unlistenable, in my opinion. I've tried over the years many times. It was the first album that I listened to, and it still is bothering me just how rough it is. I mean, I'm all for rough editing and that early raw state of every band, but this one, just the production is just too weak to consider. So on to the next tier in the mountain, which is Cold Breeze. It's cold out there, so it's still pretty bad, but at least it's getting a little bit warmer. You got 1 Second, Symbol of Life. Always easy to remember that album cover. One of the more interesting album covers. We'll come back to our covers in a moment, but Host also in 1999. So again, Symbol of Life in 2002 and Host in 1999. This is their experimental Gothic, alternative. This is by far the most accessible, which is the real reason why it gets a little bit of a push up the mountain, solely because at least they were experimenting. It is interesting. Obviously, Host is not exactly an album. I mean, by the way, worst album cover by a mile, right? It doesn't make any sense. And not only does it not make any sense, but it's also like really weird for the album cover. Host feels still fitting for the ethos of the band. Musically, it is the most accessible rock, basically. I mean, with a little bit of gothicness to it, but for the most part, these are, the Symbol of Life is catchy. I think a lot of people, a lot of fans of the band have a soft spot
for Symbol of Life because it is extremely catchy. Without question, their catchiest album to date. It's just, there's also about 6 or 7 really, really strong, iconic songs. I mean, hell, some of the most popular songs are from this album. So that's the reason why for low, but at least give it credit for its uniqueness, which is always fun to have in a large scale career of a band. All right, next. You got the tier Caught in Between, which is only one album, which is Faith Divides Us / Death Unites Us. Wicked cool album cover, album name, long, but it is still cool nonetheless. But it's caught in between because it's hard to determine where to put this one. On one hand, it's not the best. But at the other hand, at least it was better. It was an improvement from the other albums up to that point in the cycle. So it's just kind of like right smidgen in between. It's like not really, it's not bad, but it's also not great. Then you have the beginning and the end tier. And here, it's going to be a little bit of a surprise. But you have the very first album in Lost Paradise in 1990, and then you have now the most recent album that just came out today on September 19th, Ascension. Now, obviously, Ascension is just too new. People are really raving about this album. It's, good for the band. Most importantly, it's awesome that they're continuing. They've been on a really strong tilt right now. They're in a groove, right? And this album it's killing it. Seems like people are just loving this album. I want to taper the expectation a little bit. I don't want to pause, slightly. I've only been able to listen to it twice. It's good, definitely good. Sounds strong again. It's really fun to now see them like completely go Death Doom. This is really, really dark and heavy and moody. It's also just great to hear Nick. We're gonna get to this a lot, but it's great to hear Nick's vocals still really, really hold up. This guy doesn't get enough love and attention that he deserves. Outside of the fandom of the band, probably in England, he's beloved there, right? But honestly, bigger picture, he's a phenomenal singer. One of the stronger singers in just metal as a whole, without question. I never really have felt like the band is the best live. I think that's one of the factors I've seen them many, many times. They're fine, they're good, but they don't really. They fall in that category. Is what you see is what you get, and they're just directly in 1:1 ratio as far as what you hear in albums to what their output is live. They're not really fancy. They're not going to bring a lot of extras to the live show. They're pretty still, right? It's Gothic, right, and then Death Doom, etc. So it makes total sense. It fits them perfectly. But it's not like people are super excited, or gonna try to convince other people that you have to see them, like the Rammsteins and so forth, that are bigger, scale and more entertaining, right? So, but with that said, it doesn't change the fact of how, the four, ultimately the band consists of 4 members with, the rotational lineup of drummers. Although we have Jeff Singer, the very first time that a drummer came back, which is pretty cool. So welcome back, Jeff. He comes back, since 2008 or something like that was when he was, something around that was when he originally was with the band. Now he's back, so that's pretty cool. But as far as the core has always been Nick Holmes on vocals, Gregor, Aaron, and Stefan. been the nucleus, and I think that's always helped with the consistency of the band. Because one thing, I mean, outside of the Off the Mountain, I think albums, for the most part, they've been very reliable. One of the more reliable bands, even though it's really interesting because of their life cycle. They've gone through 4 different, phases, and so kind of interesting that they've been pretty darn reliable, though, considering that, and been pretty liked at the same level of popularity for pretty much their entire career. So consistency, awesome. Which, going back to that, I think is a big part of it, because the nucleus of the 4 being together from day one, which is also really cool. It's not always that common. So moving on, or back to talking about the beginning and the end. So, brushed off not talking about the debut, which is, I believe, it does not get the credit it deserves. Similar to what we just talked about with Nick Holmes being a legendary vocalist that doesn't always get the level of attention that he deserves, so does their debut. It's out there, it's different, it's heavy as hell. I mean, it's death, right? It is experimental, it's a little trippy. I love the album cover. One of my more favorite album covers, to be honest, of the band. I actually kind of really wish that they would have used that as a system moving forward. But regardless, it's a very strong. I mean, it's not perfect by any stretch, and it is rough around the edges, and the production's still not there yet. The song structures aren't quite yet there yet, but they really. I think it's pretty damn strong for a debut. It gets overlooked significantly. So in honor, in the spirit of this full life cycle of the band, and the snake feeding itself all the way to the beginning, I did feel like it feels very fitting to put the first and the last albums together. It feels poetry in motion, which has become an art form of this band. But I also really do genuinely believe that you put it into context. I think it's just as equally impressive how they began and also where they are today, 37 years and counting. Utterly impressive. I cannot stress enough how, regardless of where it actually will stack up, Ascension I'm talking about, where it actually gets stacked up, this is an impressive album to be this far into a band's career. I hope it looks like it, but I really hope that they do get the attention and love and respect for that, because that is extremely rare. I mean, they have been killing it as of late. Their last 4 albums, they've been getting stronger and stronger. And again, this does seem to be a commonality trait with the British bands. I don't know what the Brits really, they put in the effort, and they really, it seems to be a pattern here. And it's not always the case, but generally speaking, it's just utterly impressive what Ascension and what this band has been doing as of late, and I'm really, really excited to hear and to see them get the love and appreciation that they deserve. Which is actually a big part of the reason why I decided, last minute, I'm going to do this this episode, because I really appreciate their reliability and their drive and their the badassery, right? I mean, it's amazing. So moving forward, all right. Next tier is, fittingly, also poetry in motion, Paradise. All right, you're living a dream here. These albums are just they are basically the equivalent of the classics for this specific band. So you got Icon in 1993, you got Medusa in 2017, you got Obsidian in 2020, the most recent album before Ascension, and then also Draconian Times in 1995. And it's kind of cool. You got 2 early albums and you got 2 more recent albums. All 4 are amazing. They also have great album covers, all 4 of them, for different just, very different reasons. I mean, Icons is a little iconic, actually, has over the years has become that way. It's not my personal favorite, but it is kind of strong for what it is intending to do. And I've always been a sucker for the dual eyes and that relationship, the story that comes with it. Anywho, the albums they're damn good for this specific band. And they're downright almost kind of classics across the board in metal history for the most part. Just a lot of great songs. I mean, Draconian Times is probably the one that most people might have actually a little bit higher. It is probably one of the more beloved. I want to say it's their highest selling album to date. By actually probably a pretty significant margin, actually. So that's the album that has always been the the star, the attention grabbing album. But I do think that it's got probably the most classic songs from the band. But I think overall it's not quite as strong as I think what people necessarily make it out to be. But these are amazing albums. Can't go wrong. All right. Next, we got a hidden gem. This one I wanted to call out specifically. It's Shades of God in 1992. It is their second album. It's their third album, right? It's their third album. Sorry, apologies. Because you got it's their second. No, it is their third album. Goddamn. It's because then it goes. Lost, then Gothic, and then Shades of God, right? Someone's gonna correct me, but I'm pretty sure it's their third album, right? It is. I think the Dead Giveaway is actually our cover. It's got to be the third album because it is a step up in the album cover. I love the album cover. It's not necessarily in unison with what the band typically does. Actually, it's part of the reason why I guess I like it, but it's just really creative and really interesting, and it really stands out. I love how I'm a sucker for albums that are art that like is just as good small as it is big, and it's one of the albums I actually I've had on vinyl, and I've just always had because I've always loved the art cover. Anywho, the point is that this album is we talked about it. This band doesn't always get the level of attention and credit they deserve. This album in particular, I think, is kind of like the lost, album that most people kind of forget and don't talk about. I think partially because they assume that the production also is not as good, similar to on Lost, on the debut. But it's a little bit stronger. It's a little bit better production. Ultimately, there's a few reasons why this album it's my personal favorite album over there. So I'm just gonna put that out there that I'm really pushing this one up for personal preference. I didn't want to put it quite at the top, but it is it's my personal favorite. I've listened to this album more than any album by the band. By a pretty significant margin. I mean, I'm obsessed with this album. I listen to it all the time, especially when I was younger and in school, in art school. Like, this is my jam. And it's for a few reasons. First of all, Nick fucking Holmes slays on this album. I would argue not only is it his best vocal performance for what it is. Obviously, this is the death side of his, very thick baritone, intense, sounding, vocals, the singing. It's not so much singing as it is kind of, it is, but it's very aggressive and deep and intense and emotional. But I think it's his strongest, and I also think it's one of the strongest vocal performances in metal history. I know it's a bold statement, and especially for an album that not everybody even really probably necessarily likes or talks about as much, but we're all unique. We all have different ears, and spirits, and we all connect a little bit differently. But I love how he hits the exact perfect intersection of the death, but also of beauty and crystal clear, harmonious, melodic singing. You can hear every single note that he is singing, while at the same time being as intense, deep, and evil sounding as humanly possible. And I love that. Furthermore, the album doesn't get enough credit for being, it's their progressive album. I know it's weird. When has Paradise Lost ever been a progressive band? But if it ever was to be the case, it would be this album. It is their longest album by a mile. It's very lengthy. A lot of songs are 6, 7, some minutes in length. And I love its experimentation and the fact that you don't really know what you're gonna get. It weaves and it winds, it changes direction, the pace. It has great balance between speed, between, the doomy, gothic, experimentation, thick layers. It's all over the map. You get a little bit of everything. It feels like a full package album. Ironically, it feels like kind of like the sum of everything that they've done to some degree, although the one thing unique is that it doesn't have like the catchy accessibility side, and of course Nick doesn't really do any of his more melodic singing. This is pretty much just all his death growling for the most part. So it's just, I like the fact that every single time I've listened to this album hundreds of times, and every single time I always hear something new. And I love that aspect. I love its balance. It's also, if it's not their prog album, then it's definitely their groove album. Again, same thing. Paradise Lost groove doesn't really kind of gel together, but this is the album that more than any other albums. I mean, they always had groovy, riffs, but this is really groovy. And it just the licks, the riffs on this album. There's so many epic riffs. I mean, they put they're right up there with at that era. Life of Agony, Pantera, and Biohazard, and all the other groove bands. I mean, Paradise Lost. This album. I mean, put that one right in there. It's an absolutely well. Actually, okay. Speaking of masterclass. We're going to get to then the masterclass tier, the top of the tier of the mountain for Paradise Lost. And maybe it's not really a surprise, depends on your personal preference, but in my opinion, it is an easy one. It is The Plague Within in 2015. It is their masterpiece. It is the one album that from when it first came out till today, it represents the band perfectly. It is the entire life cycle jammed into one album, right? You got everything here. You have some accessibility and catchiness and some melody, harmonious, songs, but then you also have some really heavy riffs, some doom, obviously some faster pace. I mean, I think that's one of the biggest differences between, actually, quite frankly, both of these last two albums versus their Paradise Classic albums. Those albums are amazing. But similar to, like, perfect example is Ascension, right? Ascension is really, really strong from what I can tell, but right off the bat, it's not gonna get higher, I don't think, because it doesn't have the change of direction, the pace. It doesn't have really good balance. A lot of the song, it is very rhythmically repetitive, right? Not saying that that's a bad thing, especially for doom and gothic tendencies, but it doesn't change the fact that these years, I always prefer a little bit more variation of the types of songs and the pace and the balance and the overall flow of things. And, The Plague Within just does that perfectly. It has just absolutely perfect control and it has just great balance. And it is their masterpiece. There is no weakness to the album. From beginning to end, it is the perfect album that has everything going for it. So with that said, I love to hear it's gonna be totally different. Remember, this is my list. I'm not influenced by anyone or anything else. This is just from the heart, my love for the band, my appreciation for the band, my mountain of the album's 17 now in the 37-year career up to this point of these Brits. It's amazing. Paradise Lost, again, appreciate the hell out of you. Can't wait to see you yet again live for the, I don't know how many, 10th time or something like that. But I love to hear what you think. What are your thoughts? I want to see what your mountains are. And, have fun with it and just add the comments. Not too many people add comments, these days, at least not on this channel. And I don't think people realize how important it is to the flow of the channel from the algorithm standpoint. Comments are pretty much everything at this point. Even more important than the views themselves, it seems like, based on what I can tell of the algorithm. So comment anything. Throw anything in there. Just, comment. Also, like and subscribe as usual. And until the next time, you know what I'm going to say next, so you say it. Cheers.